You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to Filmmaking Conversations with Damian Swaby.
Today on Filmmaking Conversations, I speak to a brilliant cinematographer. This German-born cinematographer, who graduated from the University of Television and Film in Munich, has quickly developed an impressive CV of visually unique and critically acclaimed feature films. The cinematographer in question is Markus FÖRDERER. Markus has collaborated with director Roland Emmerich on the landmark period drama Stonewall, which premiered at the 2015 Toronto International Film Festival, and the sci-fi blockbuster from 20th Century Fox, Independence Day: Resurgence. His recent feature film, Red Notice, was just released on Netflix. The action comedy marked the streamer's most watched movie of all time. And now, for my filmmaking conversation with the youngest active member of the American Society of Cinematographers, Markus FÖRDERER. Markus, how are you today?
Good. Thanks for having me, Damien.
Anytime. I love having cinematographers on and speaking to them about their work and everything else. And you've done so many great films. Some I didn't know you was involved in until I kept seeing the name pop up. And I thought, all right, I've got to ask Markus to come on the podcast because he's done loads and loads of great work. But I've covered some of your information and history at the top of the podcast. So tell us, at what stage did you realize that the artistic use of light and colors and composition actually meant something to you?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think like most filmmakers, right? Like you start being influenced by the movies you watch early on. It was like 2001 for me, early on, Kubrick on a tiny television, and I realized this is such a different experience from everything I've seen before. And then over the course, like over the years, I thought like I want to be a filmmaker, so I thought I want to be a director. So, and I started researching and reading books and do research in film school. And the more I read about it and read interviews with cinematographers and directors, I realized what I'm really fascinated in is really working with light and the camera work and the visual aspect to it. So I realized what I really want to do is become a cinematographer. And I think I was maybe like 18, 19 when I was really clear making this decision and pursuing a path through film school. I went to a film school in Munich and worked on sets before and after. So this is how it all started.
How did you find film school? Because a lot of people I've spoken to haven't gone to film school, and some wish they had, and some who have say they didn't really need to. But your process and what's happened with your career, was film school important to you?
Yeah, I think it really it shaped in a way, like maybe the way you think about certain storytelling aspects. Like there's a couple of things that I really appreciate about the film school experience. Like you meet a lot of like-minded people, right? You're around the same age. Everybody in the first years in our film school, we were all mixed up together, like directors, producers, writers, cinematographers. So we could connect and create like bonds, right? Like work on each other's projects, help each other out, and you learn from each other. And also there's maybe a certain sense of competition sometimes. Like you see how great the work is of your friends, and you want to raise the bar or show them something that the teacher's proud of. But I have to say the most important thing that goes maybe for every art form is like you have to find your own voice, and this is something you cannot really learn. And like I feel like the most important aspect for me was actually the library. There's a huge library in the film school, and I went there reading a lot, and we could borrow movies like Blu-rays, and I watched 2-3 movies a day. Like we watched movies in class and sequences, and then at home at night I watched 1 or 2 more, and just analyzing why is that interesting, and why is that sequence so captivating. Watching movies without sound, which is really helpful, just to see the visual flow. I think this is important. And then I met the director, Tim Philbaum, who I worked with on my first feature film. It was his first feature too. So we were both students at the film school. So that helped basically forming bonds with directors.
That sounds amazing. The friendly competition and forming bonds. A lot of people mention that the bonds that you can form and going on in certain relationships, like cinematographer, director, and producer, writer, director, cinematographer, and moving your careers on at the same time and the same level in many ways. But you've also been very interested in Ridley Scott's Alien and one of my favorite films, Seven. So influences when you're at film school, do you discuss your personal influences together? Is that something that helps you work together in the future?
I think, yeah, in a way, or also people, I think in my class back then, had very different interests, some like European art house interests, and some people wanted like to do very experimental stuff. And I was always a big fan of science fiction. And like you mentioned, Alien was such an inspiration, like creating a world, right? Like visually, like that's what cinema can do, right? Like no other art form, creating a world that's so different and immersing yourself and telling a story within. I always felt a bit maybe alone in that part, but I was even heard. I think I remember when we applied for film school, you have to put a list of films that influence you, and I knew one of the top parts. I put Alien, 7, and I put Independence Day on because I love the first Independence Day from Roland Emmerich, because such a big global spectacle storytelling. And I writing this in the application, I thought there's maybe 50-50 chance they're not gonna take me, because like, you know, a European film school, they tend to be very artsy and making different kinds of movies. But I thought it's important to like stick to what you believe in, right? And as this came full circle years later, I would have never imagined that I end up doing the sequel to Independence Day with Roland Emmerich. I had no clue this could happen. So he was one of my big heroes. So that was amazing.
So when you applied for film school, was there even a little bit of you that thought maybe I should just put a few art house films down just to help me maybe get through the door, knowing that it can be a bit?
Well, I have to add, like, I didn't just apply to film school and was accepted. Like this, I think when I grew up in Germany in the Black Forest, it's like southern part of Germany, close to the border of France. And there's like at the time, were 4 major film schools in the country. And I applied to most of them, and I was rejected. And then I kept working. It takes like another year until you can apply again. So I kept working as an assistant or an electrician and gaffer on smaller projects. And then I applied again. I was rejected again. And then I moved to Munich to start an internship at ARRI Camera Rental in Munich. It's like their headquarters. And I learned so much about cameras and working with assistants, and filmmakers came in and out. And then I was living in Munich, and then it was obvious for me to apply at the Munich Film School, which I haven't done so before, because I always heard it's very difficult to get accepted there. But by then I loved the city and I applied there, and then I managed to get in. It's different countries, right? In the US or the UK, especially in the US, it seems very different, where it's very expensive to go to film school. In Germany, it's pretty much almost for free, but it's very hard to get accepted. It's funded by the government, but you have to there's so many people who want to get into this. You have to create some short films and then do a visual presentation and whatnot to get accepted. So that's so important, right? If you really believe in something, you have to keep doing it and pushing it. It will take time. Like, it doesn't happen from overnight. And if there's setbacks, like I mentioned, I was rejected twice from most major film schools. That doesn't mean maybe I was early or whatever the reasons were. But if you feel you have something to say visually and as a filmmaker, just stick to it and keep improving your skills and keep doing it, right? It's not about getting a label like, oh, you went to film school, you have a degree, that nobody really cares about that degree. It's about what films you've done, what experiences you've been through. So all these, that's part you can do along the way as you're pursuing a goal. Maybe your goal is to shoot a certain, whatever, feature film or a series or whatever it is, and this might not work out right away, but on that journey you will collaborate maybe with filmmakers on commercials or music videos, and all this will build up your like resume, and you learn on each project. You learn so much that maybe 5-6 years later down the road, this comes in really handy to solve a certain problem which you solved on this tiny, no budget project, but you figured out how to do day for night or something like that. So always stay on track and follow your passion.
You persevered like that, and it's obviously worked out well for you. I'm really happy that you've done so. It's really inspiring to many people listening that you've behaved and thought in that manner. And working at ARRI headquarters as a trainee in the camera rental department, what was that experience like, and what were the things you were learning of assistants?
Yeah, it was interesting. Like I've worked on a couple sets as an intern and like lower level positions. So I got a sense of how the film sets work. But then being at the rental, you get so many projects and way bigger projects coming in and prepping. There was camera assistants from all over the world who shot in Europe. They came prepping, or DPs coming in to do a test, maybe testing cameras or lenses. Yeah, it was just interesting. I learned just how every little cable is called. Like still today, I know all these numbers and codes for all the gear. That was really just helpful from a technical perspective to know, like to really understand all that stuff. And it gave me time. Sometimes when there was a quiet phase, maybe sometimes there's a quiet day, I could shoot my own tests, and that was really helpful. Like I was always fascinated by digital cameras, so when I started there, still 35mm film was the dominant medium to shoot feature films, and there was like only I think 2 people working at that time on the digital. It was called ARRI D20 back then, which then became D21, and out of this project came the ARRI Alexa. And I was always fascinated in talking to those guys and testing the early digital cameras, and shot filter tests and lens tests with this. And back then, most people would say like, oh, the professionals will always shoot on film. This is video, right? And then things changed so much. I mean, luckily film is still an option, but it was clear where the future is heading. And yeah, I think it was just it was a time I didn't get to shoot much of my own projects. Like I was more like testing and meeting other filmmakers and just see maybe like what the process is, like how they test stuff, how certain hierarchies work, and the professionalism, right? Like how people are on time and all this stuff. It was a good time.
Great. I'm glad you sound like you enjoyed it. I mean, and that says a lot as well. I learned so much that you can take with you, which is always handy, or more than handy, I should say. But the first thing I ever saw from you, which I really, really enjoyed, brilliant, just brilliant, was the film Stonewall. So how did you become a part of that film, and what led you to making the decision to shoot Stonewall?
Yeah, glad you watched it. It's a period film, right? It takes place in New York in the late 60s. It's about the Stonewall riots. And so one of the producers on my first film, my first feature, it's called Hell. There was Roland Emmerich, but I haven't met him during the production. He was shooting something else. And at some point when the movie came out, there was like a special screening in LA where they showed the film to agents and producers, and that's when Roland Emmerich saw the film for the first time in a finished form with sound mix and color timing, and I think he loved the look and what we've done visually, because visually very extreme film, and he mentioned like this little passion project, it's called Stonewall, like a 25 million budget, which for me by the time was huge, but for him it was a small passion project. And we started talking a bit about it, and then time passed, and I think a year later they were about to shoot that and had a green light, and I had the opportunity to like come in. I met him and his producers and created a pitch and presentation and showed some visual ideas how that could look like and how we could shoot that, and like he really responded to it. And when I was walking towards the door after the interview, I was really nervous and walked out, and I heard them whispering him to his producer, like hire the kid, because I was so much younger than him. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. So when we shot this movie, like Roland Emmerich he's a really experienced filmmaker, right? He shot so many big films, and he's used to working on sound stages a lot to have total control over everything, lighting, and also the pacing. So your film schedule is not dictated by daylight or location availability, but you build it on stage. So the big challenge on Stonewall was to recreate like interior and exteriors in New York City on a huge stage. So we built that famous stretch of Christopher Street and a park inside a big warehouse, so to say. And that's where I learned a lot. We tested a lot, and usually on these kind of films, you would use a big green screen to do set extensions, but we had fairly limited resources. Roland came up to me and say, "Oh, we don't need much. We just need to be able to shoot 360 without visual effects, and with the lighting being always nice and backlit." And so I figured out with the production designer, we built a small miniature cardboard model, and that's when I did research and we looked into photo back translights, like this, big photographic prints. So we built facades, and at both ends of the streets we used it was a brand new technique back then. It's like a Roscoe's soft drop. It's like a special fabric which is very matte and looks like a real object. It doesn't look like a glossy, shiny print. So you can take pictures on a location and print it in any size you want. So we printed huge buildings and the end of both streets. So we ended up actually shooting all this stuff in camera. Like we could shoot 360. We shot anamorphic with shallow depths of field to give the illusion that those prints are actually have some dimension to it. It's similar, but like very in fashion now, doing video walls, like virtual production, just that the content is not moving. You print it, but it's a similar technique where you have similar limitations and stuff you have to watch out for. And I made real cars driving, extras, and wind machines to blow the trees and all that stuff. But yeah, this was a great experience. It was really satisfying. Shot in Canada and Montreal. Because we couldn't go to New York, it would have been too expensive. That was the thing, like we thought about it, but really shooting on a real location, which looks different today. It's not historically accurate anymore. And then locking that down and shoot there for such a long time would have been impossible with our budget.
Completely. And from what I can see from the past, you really did recreate that world in such a great way. Even the bits in the park, the guy that was sitting on the bench and everything with his little dog, and inside the bar and around it looked beautiful. And I wonder, when you're prepping for something like that, how long does it take, especially considering you have to recreate daylight in an actual studio without any natural light, I'm guessing?
Yeah, so I think it's different on each project, the amount of prep time you have. Like I think usually also up to the cinematographer to maybe recommend a certain time to the producers. Like I think it needs that much time to get that all prepared, and because usually producers want to hire you as late as possible sometimes to save money, but you're saving money a lot by prepping everything right and knowing exactly what's needed. So that's the thing with me. If I really have time to prep, there's no waste of resources, right? We don't have like trucks full of equipment, which we don't need. But sometimes some people maybe are forced to just rent lots of equipment so they're prepared for any scenario because they didn't have the time to pre-plan it and think it through. So in this case, I mean, it's usually, I don't know, maybe it's like 2 months, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. So in this case, we did build this cardboard models to figure everything out. I used my phone as a viewfinder basically inside to figure out how tall these prints have to be, where can we hide lights, and like that's where I really learned to keep it really simple. And like if you want to mimic daylight on a soundstage, you just have to follow what nature is doing, which is like one major light source, right? And it's the sun, or if it's overcast, it's a soft sky, and not add additional light sources to cheat and shape something, because then you can tell that it feels maybe too stylized, unless that's a look you're going for. But so we, in this case, then with testing, I tested just with flashlights on a copper model and my phone, and I realized with one flashlight and some indirect bounce, that's the way to go. So we had a big 18K. Okay, we cheated with two 18K suns to create two different shafts, and most of the rest is like a passive bounce inside the set and some sky fabric.
Excellent. So how important?
And it's very important, right, to talk it through with your.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
It's very important with the director to talk through the shots, right? To talk through the shots, so you know maybe where you're not wasting resources by lighting 360 if you don't need it, but where can you cut corners and what's important to focus on. To like, so usually we write a storyboard or have previews for certain parts, and then go from there.
And how important is it for you to, I wouldn't say demand, but suggest who you want as crew members, a part of the camera crew? Is that something you always say to director, these are my guys, these are my go-to guys, and I have to have them work with me? Or does a producer have other ideas in mind?
Again, this all depends. I'm not a person who says like, I only work with those 5 people. I think because right, films take you to all different kinds of places of the world. So I rarely work in 2 cities back to back. Like it's like I'm based in LA, but then you shoot in Canada or in something you shoot in Europe and whatever, UK, and every time it's different. So you can't travel always with your crew. And I think I'm also very respectful of the director's preferences. So some directors, they have certain camera operators they love to work with. So I'm always have a conversation with them first about like, is there any people you like to work with? Here are the people are available and I like to work with. So I think it's important to have a conversation and not just dictate the people you want to work with. And of course it helps if you build a relationship with your gaffer or camera assistant or operator, to bring them. But then again, I see it's same like when you, as a director, when you're casting your actors for a different part, the same goes for your crew. Like maybe not every gaffer or camera operator is the right choice for each project, but there's some things always fall into place. You know, shoot in a certain region and maybe this person is the right one. And then sometimes I have to start from scratch and find a whole new crew, which I also enjoy because you get to meet new people and you learn right the way they work. Like sometimes I work in Asia, or like I'm about to go to Bangkok now for a shoot and working with an entirely new crew. And it's always exciting. You bring something to the table and you learn how they work, and that always keeps you inspired. And then I go back to the US, and because there's a certain way of making movies in the Hollywood system, and it's always I think it's good to see how movies are done in other parts of the world, and that it is possible to do maybe things in a smaller scale and still achieve a lot of production value.
Excellent. And how often would you say, well, how much of a percentage of your work is back home in Europe? Are you mostly coming back to Europe, or are you spending more times in Asia and Americas?
Yeah, I would say most of the time I spend in the US, but I try maybe every other year to find a project in Europe. If it works out, then I get to see my family, and it's also I enjoy working with European crews. And it's so busy these days that most big stages they're so full of capacity. So that if you have a movie, you can't just choose where to shoot. You have to really look for capacity, and maybe it is somewhere in London or Eastern Europe or Berlin. I'm going to do a project soon in Berlin and a big soundstage because we need the capacity. And then like in the US, so many projects go to Atlanta, but it's it's getting busy everywhere with all the streaming companies, right? And everybody producing so much content. So it's a good time for filmmakers.
One of your mentors was Michael Balhas. I think that's how I pronounce his surname.
That's right.
And what did you learn from this relationship you had with your previous mentor? And do you think mentors are still important and can be vital for up and coming cinematographers?
Absolutely. I mean, I met him through my time at film school. So he was one of the professors, and we did some workshops. I, of course, was so familiar with his work, and I really learned. That's what the key takeaway from that time and working, like, or getting to know Michael Ballhaus was really his personality. That it's not just about being the best, most talented, right, cinematographer and telling everyone this is how we're going to do it and winning flashy awards. It's your personality that allows, first of all, makes everyone on set feel comfortable, like your director feeling comfortable working with you, and the actors feeling comfortable opening up in front of camera. And I think the role of the cinematographer is so important in that, by keeping the technical part as invisible as possible. That's what I always try to do, right? Like minimize the amount of equipment you see on set and lighting through the window, or using practicals and using camera. If there's a simple way to shoot it, maybe just with a steady cam and not needing a big crane, I would try to do that, and to be flexible and follow the actors and not dictate where the actors have to go. And that's something that really he was so good at, and just his personality. Everybody loved working with him, and the way he approached working on set. And this is like equally important than your skill set. And then from a technical standpoint, or like what he was so famous for, is really his camera movement, right? Like he was the first to do a 360-degree dolly move, which is hard to imagine that this was not always a thing, but he really was the first one to do that, and always moving the camera. And there's other DPs who are very focused on lighting, and so I really learned, because I'm very drawn into like creating a mood with lighting, and everything has to go together, movement, composition, and lighting. But I learned a lot because he's so precise about his framing and camera movement.
Oh, excellent. It sounds like you had a great time being taught by him and learning so much, especially the personality side of things, because maybe some people forget that, and it might not be of benefit to them at times to not be very personable. You mentioned in Stonewall it was on a sound stage and everything was created from scratch to recreate a look. But in one of your other films, Red Notice, that's on Netflix right now, that feels like, and I'm probably wrong, I could be wrong, I don't know, that you had to have some live, real locations, or was that a studio soundstage film as well?
That is as well. The majority is shot on stages. There was the unique situation for us back then was that we shot during the beginning of the pandemic, and had to, when the global shutdown happened, we had to stop production, and there was a big pause, and we had to rethink how we can shoot this. It's a movie that takes place all over the world, right? Like Bali, Spain, Italy, and we had a plan to shoot in many of those locations for real. So we had to adapt, and when we continued shooting, we shot the majority on a soundstage and on a backlot. So we built a lot of the sets on a backlot or on a soundstage, and also used LED video walls for projecting basically real plates of locations that we shot. Most of them I could shoot myself, and then shoot it on a soundstage, so we wouldn't have to travel globally. But then towards the end, when things opened up a bit, we also went to relocations. Like we did go to Rome to shoot that opening sequence, and like the camera flies through the city and ends up in that close-up of Dwayne Johnson's character and all this stuff. So we tried to tie in everything with real locations and real aerial shots and establishing shots, but the majority was shot on stages. Coming back to what I said earlier, I did this movie Stonewall years ago, where I started using those photo backdrops. So this helped me then years later solving problems where we couldn't travel and we couldn't build, like no matter your budget, you never have enough money and enough time to create everything the way you want. So this really was helpful for us to use photographic prints to extend our sets. Like, of course, there's visual effects in certain sequences, but wherever possible, we used photographic prints to extend like the jungle or there's other sequences in a Bali beach house to allow us to look through windows without using green screen.
Have you thought of upgrading your cinematography game? Would you like to have an ASC cinematographer mentor you for free? Join veteran cinematographer Suki Medenzovic, ASC, Disney, Pixar, FX Networks, Netflix, American Horror Story, as he teaches you how to create beautiful images using 3 lighting techniques he has mastered on film sets over his 30-plus years in the film industry. Each technique uses basic, low-cost lighting equipment so that anyone can achieve beautiful visuals no matter your project's budget. If you want to take your cinematography to the next level, visit filmmakingconversations.com to sign up for instant access.
I'm finding it hard to imagine, but you mentioned about maybe not having cranes and other kind of expansive pieces of kit. Were there any times you would be able to be quite small shooting this film, maybe with just your steady camera, as you said? I'm thinking in my mind, there's one scene where they're tied up around a pole, the rock, and one of them might get stabbed or shot or something along those lines. Were you able to maybe make things a bit smaller in a scene like that, or was it still full on loads of kit?
No, this was fairly intimate, right? It's the scene where Ryan Reynolds and Dwayne Johnson's characters, they're tied on a pole, and Gal Gadot is coming in to interrogate them with her partner in crime. And yeah, for me, this was a joy to shoot because I knew the two actors would be tied on a pole, so I could, from a lighting perspective, you can really light to the point because you know exactly where the actor's gonna be. They cannot go anywhere. It's always a thing, right? When actors don't hit their mark, and they might step out of the light, or it's a compromise for framing. So this was pretty interesting and unique way to shoot. But we kept it pretty small. It's just like 3 cameras. We tried to capture always 2 or 3 cameras because of all the comedy and improvisation to allow them to come up with a joke, and would always shoot a version exactly like in the script, but also allow them the freedom to improvise. And for this, you need multiple cameras, and that's always, you can't have 3 big cranes in a small location, right? Like this is really shot with 3 dollies and parts handheld and part on Steadicam. And it's always the challenge to not compromise. Like, some directors and cinematographers, they're a big proponent of doing single camera, right? There's only one perfect spot where the camera can be at a certain time. But in my experience, there's always something. It's like a big Rubik's Cube to solve. Like, how do you place multiple cameras and keep the lighting right and interesting for all of them? And there's always a way. And I really enjoy that process to figure out how to bring all these pieces together.
Excellent. I like the sound of that. And earlier again, you mentioned having a certain personality on set and being open and allowing everybody to feel free and easy to work with you and the director and everybody else. So can you give us an example of an inspiring conversation you and the director had before you chose to shoot a film, and how that conversation continued without shooting a film?
Yeah, I think it's so important, like you mentioned that, like you don't just get a phone call and we'll hire you to do movie X. Can you come tomorrow? It's usually a long process with directors you maybe know and work with before, to stay in touch and watch movies together, even if there's no specific project on the horizon. Or in the case of Red Notice with Rawson Thurber and we met for I would say 6 months before there was even like a green light for the project. We kept meeting up in a theater and watched all kinds of movies, sometimes sequences and sometimes entire movies, just to learn about what we like, what does work, what doesn't work, and just to find the right tone. Because I feel like if you start with a script, there's so many ways you can tell that story visually, And especially if you haven't worked with a director before, it's even more important to watch stuff together, so you have an understanding. Like maybe there's a dark night scene in the script, and like how dark is dark, right? Like people say, oh yeah, let's go really dark and moody, but then maybe the director will say, but yeah, but I have to see everything to get the emotion, or the other way around. You want really feel like, and this is hard to convey in words. It's important to look at references and watch stuff together. And the longer I think that process is, the better. Like the more you don't feel rushed on the day when you have to make a quick decision, and maybe things change. Things always change, right? You don't get that location, or you're losing an actor or something like that, and or one camera breaks down and or a lens, and you have to shoot it differently. But the more you have done your research and prep, the faster it is for you to come up with a solution that's right in the moment.
Excellent. And Independence Day in 1996, when that film came out and the whole world loved it, including you and I, did you feel any kind of added pressure, or I don't know if added pressure is the right word, but how did you feel shooting the latest version of Independence Day Resurgence, knowing that it's something that you've loved since you was a kid?
Yeah, it was a surreal moment. Like it was such a big influence, the first film, but the new one, the script was very different. So much time has passed, and in conversations with Roland Emmerich, who directed the first one, right, and the second one, he wanted to create something new that's, of course, ties into this world, but that feels up to date and fresh. And so I knew the old one in and out, basically, and really great respect. But Carl Walter Lindenlaub did the DP of the first one, and but it's like everything. Like you take it piece by piece, you talk it through, and look at storyboards and do some tests. And it was, I have to say, a fairly wasn't a very complicated shoot in that way. And also it helped that I just before made this movie Stonewall with Roland, so we had just worked together and created a good shorthand. And it's also important not to think about it maybe too much, to just follow the story, what's in the script, and what are the challenges at hand. And like the interesting thing, right? The old one, they used so many like miniatures and practical effects, what I always loved. And in the new one, some of the scope there was no other ways than using visual effects. So when a lot of visual effects get involved, there's a lot of planning and discussions. And also very important, I think, the role as a cinematographer to be actively proposing ways to shoot something, because on a lot of the big movies, the visual effects department starts fairly early, like in pre-production, because there's such a big amount of work coming towards the end. So they sometimes start even before a cinematographer. And it's if there's something in a script that's a bit more difficult than two people having a conversation on a table, then people think, oh yeah, this has to be green screen, or we can do this and solve it with visual effects. But I think it's the role of a cinematographer to propose ways to shoot something practical in camera. And there's many techniques over the years that are so valid still, right? Like, or is it like a split screen you can do, or a motion control, or use a photographic backdrop, or do a miniature, and just discuss those solutions, to not always rely on visual effects, because that's, I think, dangerous to get in this overly stylized world of when everything is CG.
Agreed. I understand what you mean completely there. But of all the projects you've done, and well, not just all the projects you've done, generally I will say is many people do projects for different reasons, and many people get something out of them that may differ from someone else. What is the most satisfying aspect for you as a cinematographer when you finish a film?
I mean, for me, the most satisfying is to watch the final finished film when it's all done, edited, color timed, and watch it that's the moment I really make the movie for. And everything up to this point is always right. You might be nervous to, will it all work out, and do we have all the pieces needed and the right approach? So there's this challenges every day in pre-production, in production, and also in post-production. And you want to make sure, a lot of people think now you go in post and everything will get better with color timing and everything, but that's also a great risk that maybe some of the original intentions get lost. And so you have to be really careful to remind yourself and every collaborator, right, being it the colorist or the effects supervisor, what's really the goal here, and stay on track and bring it over the finishing line. So, you know, like whatever, for example, you have a bright window behind you and you did your best to light it in a way that there's detail out there. And then in color timing, sometimes we need more contrast, and then all these details are blown out or your blacks get crushed. So you have to be careful to maintain the intended look. Or the other way around, maybe you intended something to be silhouetted and moody, and then the dailies come back and they printed it up and it looks properly exposed, and it might be technically correct, but it lost its emotional core, right? So that's why it's so important as a cinematographer to be involved in the whole process, and especially in color timing. So I always do everything I can to keep time free to be in there in the process, because the director, of course, the director is the final creative force on everything, but you can't be an expert in every detail of the process, right? So I think they heavily rely on the cinematographer to figure it all out together.
So you often sit with the director and the colorist and go through things together and figure things out for him, and he will be able to basically say, thank you, that is what I want. And it's pretty much like that, isn't it?
Yeah, like it depends. Some directors, they come in maybe once every couple of days to see the progress of the color grade, and we, together with the colorist, will finesse the look. And some other directors, they are really hands-on. They want to be there every moment, every second, and see what's going on. It's very difficult. Not difficult. They're very different from person to person. Yeah, and I like the collaborative process too. Like when a director has a strong opinion, and this should be really dark, and then you have to also argue, right? Like there's technical aspects to consider. What people will not only watch it in a dark theater, but on their iPad or phone and whatnot. Taking all this into consideration, how to get your creative intent to work on all environments that people consume movies these days.
It's very different these days. Sometimes I'm on the tube, like the underground transport system in London, and in the morning I might look to my left and see someone with an iPad watching Avengers or whatever, and I just think, wow, it's so different now to be able to think about the fact that people are going to do that. I mean, how do you feel? I've read some articles, and some cinematographers and directors pretty much would prefer people watch their films in the cinema, and if they have to, at home, but they're not fond of people watching their films on a phone or an iPad. I mean, how do you feel about those type of situations?
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak from my personal experience that nothing beats the cinematic experience of watching it in a big cinema with proper projection and sound. Right, you really forget about the environment. You're deeply immersed, and it's just a more physical experience. The smaller the device you watch it on, the more you might be distracted or miss certain parts of information. But I think it's all important. The most important is that people get to see your work and enjoy it, whatever the environment it might be, right? Some people watch it on a plane, some people watch it on their phone. Better they watch it there than they don't watch it at all, I would say. But I think if you're a true film lover, you will pick the films you want to watch in a theater and go watch it there, or watch it multiple times, watch it at home, watch it in a theater. Same happened to me. Like I watched, what was the last Bond movie? I've seen it 3-4 times, and the last time I saw it in an IMAX in London, actually, the big IMAX, and I was moved to tears at the end. And this never happened to me before, but suddenly, even knowing what's going to happen, the seeing it in that large image and that immersive sound was just a complete different emotional experience.
makes complete sense. The experience in the cinema is one of a kind, that's for sure. And what can we see from you next? What will be out next that we can watch from you?
Yeah. So Red Notice just came out on Netflix. There's also a movie I shot just before. It's called The Colony, which in the US is on Netflix. I'm not sure in the UK. It's different in different markets. I'm working on something new, but it's not coming out anytime soon, so I have to wait a bit.
Okay, I'll wait. We'll wait. We look forward to it, definitely. But Markus, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to speak to me, and good luck with all. And I'm looking forward to what I see next from you.
Thank you, Damien. It was a pleasure.
If you like this podcast, share it with friends, leave a comment in the comments section, and hit the subscribe button.